Okay, everyone, with just 70 days till the midterm elections, Donald Trump's policy strategy to keep Republicans winning appears to be to make life harder and more expensive for you and them, make it harder for them, too. I mean, take, for example, Trump's decision to restart his trade war with Canada. We were just talking about this with Jim Messina and Tim Miller. One of, again, our most important trading partners and one of the most important trading partners to a lot of states. Over the weekend, after walking away from trade negotiations, the Trump administration announced a new 50% tariff on Canadian goods. And today, a very pissed off Canada responded by announcing retaliatory tariffs as high as 50% on hundreds of American products, a lot of which come from states like Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, and Wisconsin. You know, the states where voters will go to the polls in a matter of weeks. Excellent work, Mr. President. You got him this time. Or how about Trump's plan to bring down the price of beef from its near record high? Apparently, Trump's big strategy for that is to encourage imports of ground beef, 300,000 metric tons of it, by exempting it from his own tariffs for 90 days, like some sort of an arsonist promising to stop pouring gasoline on a fire, but only for a limited time. There's also the added fact, and this is very important, that no one in his administration is willing to say where this new mystery beef is coming from, just that it will be cheaper. They promise. Just trust them, of course, because they're to be trusted. Nor have they factored in the medium and long-term impact on farmers and ranchers in states that include Iowa, Montana, Nebraska, and Texas, and yes, North Carolina, too. One angry farmer in North Carolina told Queen City News that he thinks this beef exemption is pure politics and that Trump is, quote, trying to buy votes for the midterms. Doing this is not going to help any rancher or cattle farmer in this country. Joining me now is the former governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, who is now the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in that state. It's great to see you, Governor. I just want to start with this renewed trade war with Canada and how it's going to impact North Carolina. And I wanted to play for you something that Ontario Premier Doug Ford said yesterday. You and he have very different styles, I'm just going to say, but he makes some interesting points in here. So we'll talk about it on the other side.
When it comes to the midterms, I have a message to the Americans. Don't vote in a person that's going to kill your jobs. He ran on creating more jobs. Last time I checked, jobs went down in the U.S. and Ontario created more jobs. He ran on reducing the cost of living. Last time I checked, food's more expensive down there. Homes are more expensive. And the reason homes are more expensive because he has a tariff on our lumber, which 33% of all homes that are built in the U.S. use Canadian lumber.
Again, maybe different styles here, but make some interesting points. The retaliatory tariffs were announced today. What's your response to Trump restarting this tariff war with our neighbor to the north and the impact it could have in a state like North Carolina?
Why are we fighting with Canada?
Good question.
Is North Carolina's number one foreign export country. And what we're seeing is small businesses and farmers getting killed. Pender and Wilson County already hurt by the cost of fertilizer and equipment and having a difficult time making a profit. I was with Ann today, runs Scottish Gourmet USA. The tariffs are cutting into her profits, which she has very little now, and the rest of them are being passed on to consumers. We're hearing it from people. Stuff just costs too much. My opponent, though, Michael Whatley, is going to do and say whatever this president tells him to do and say, regardless of whether it's good for the people of North Carolina or the people of this country. And he says that prices are going down. He says that we've defeated inflation. He says that the tariffs are an important economic tool. We know that that's not true. And I think the people of North Carolina are going to see that they're not benefiting from this and in fact are hurting. But what he's going for here is the money to fuel his campaign. He knows North Carolina is close and can go either way. The Supreme Court a month or so ago gave them a new tool that is the worst decision since Citizens United that allows these joint committees They're going to funnel this money through and have unlimited spending. And now they're scheming to get a discount rate on television advertising for all of it. And so his plan is to just overwhelm us. That's why we need grassroots donations, why we need help here in North Carolina to make sure we win this race and take back the Senate majority. People can go to roycooper.com, see our plan to lower prices and to help us out.
I know that in North Carolina, early vote ballots go out pretty soon in the next 2 weeks, I believe. It's the earliest state in the country where those go out. A lot of people saw this news about the Supreme Court decision yesterday, and it made them really nervous about their ability to participate in the process. What are you telling people about that in North Carolina? What should people out there understand about their ability to early vote?
People should know that elections are going to be safe and secure, and they should be ready to vote. But we know that this potential Supreme Court decision, if they come back and decided on the merits to allow any part of this executive order to go forward, it could potentially throw the election into chaos, particularly when it comes to absentee ballots in North Carolina. We're already seeing our Republican-controlled Board of Elections take steps to make it harder for people to vote. They have curbed Sunday voting. They have taken ballot boxes from college campuses, and clearly they're targeting people that they don't believe are going to vote for them. So if they get any inkling that this Supreme Court is going to allow any part of this executive order on these absentee ballots, then we could potentially have a problem. But we need people to come out and vote, and we're going to fight them every step of the way. And I think you're seeing a lot of people in North Carolina, particularly on college campuses, are having a "I'll show you" attitude. Mm-hmm. You're not going to take our vote away. We'll show you. I went to North Carolina A&T State University, the largest HBCU in North Carolina. They removed that ballot box from their campus, but the students are marching to the nearest polling place, and they're spreading the word that it's really important for them to get out and vote in this election because our country needs a course correction. And that's what they can do in these midterms by putting the checks and balances back into the Constitution that the framers intended.
Former Governor Roy Cooper, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jen.
At 6:58 a.m. this morning, Donald Trump posted on social media that he is, quote, giving serious consideration to changing the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America. That is, of course, a lie. Donald Trump doesn't know how to give serious consideration to anything. And 3 hours later, the man who launched what the Wall Street Journal is calling the dumbest trade war in history posted the dumbest map of our northern border that anyone working in the American government has ever used. To which Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell replied, "Let's just call it Lake Natalie, so we know you'll start protecting our Great Lakes." It is Natalie Harp's job in the White House to help Donald Trump post what functions now as maps like this one right here. This is a map of Donald Trump's mental decline. That's what it actually maps. It's like the one that she no doubt, Natalie Harp, this is her work, no doubt, helping Donald Trump with this kind of thing today. That's what the American taxpayer is paying Natalie Harp for. Natalie Harp has been trying to help Donald Trump tweet his way to victory in the war that he started in Iran. But the racist posts that she helps Donald Trump put out about the Obamas and the other madness she helps Donald Trump put out on social media isn't winning his war in Iran. Natalie Harp is surely busy helping Donald Trump post deranged images of himself as a member of the United States military, a commander, like this sheer madness posted by Donald Trump with Natalie Harp's help. Amazingly enough, that post of Donald Trump pretending to be a general was posted on August 4th. And Iran still hasn't surrendered. 21 days later, I mean, look at how scary Donald Trump looks standing there with Douglas MacArthur and George Patton, two of the most famous generals of World War II, each of whom have been the subjects of Hollywood movies. And maybe when Hollywood gets around to making a worshipful movie about General Trump, Iran will finally surrender. Look at that image. And imagine how small the brains have to be, how tiny the brains have to be of the people, the two people who put those tiny brains together, Donald Trump and Natalie Harp, to post madness like that. Imagine how small those Natalie Harp and Donald Trump brains are when they're collaborating on how to scare Iran today on social media. In their best-selling book, Regime Change, Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan reported that Vice President James David Vance advised Donald Trump against starting a war with Iran. On page 402, they report, quote, but with the exception of the vice president, nobody on the senior team, not his Secretary of State, not his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, not his chief of staff, had made a real effort to talk him out of it. On the next page, they have this account of the final meeting about going to war in Iran. On Thursday, February 26th, around 5 p.m., the final go, no-go meeting got underway in the Situation Room. By now, the positions of everyone in the room had crystallized. Everything had been discussed in prior meetings. Everyone knew everyone else's stance. The president was the president, and they would back his decision. There were no presentations, no paperwork, just a discussion that would last an hour and a half. The war planning group had been kept so tight that the two key officials who would need to manage the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Energy Secretary Chris Wright, were still not in the loop one day before the launch of the war, nor was the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. The Director of National Intelligence wasn't even in the room for the final go, no-go meeting. Today, the Wall Street Journal is reporting this about Tulsi Gabbard. Days before going to war with Iran in February, President Trump summoned his intelligence chief to the Oval Office to ask whether a full-on assault was a good idea. Then Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, outlined assessments from America's intelligence apparatus, according to people familiar with the meeting. She told Trump that killing Iran's supreme leader would likely usher in a more hardline regime open to acquiring nuclear weapons. Tehran would rush to close the Strait of Hormuz, destabilizing the global energy market, and it would strike U.S. forces and partners in the Middle East, prompting questions about American resolve and reliability with allies. And so Donald Trump was warned. And Donald Trump alone made the decision to go to war. Today's Wall Street Journal report includes Donald Trump's reaction to Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, several leaders from Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, contacted the White House seeking an end to the fighting and a face-saving diplomatic solution for all involved. Republicans also called Trump, telling him the war was hurting the party's prospects in the November midterms. Trump privately fumed at the backlash. Officials said he queried aides about why Iran wasn't backing down amid the unrelenting bombing campaign. On June 17 came the breakthrough, an interim peace agreement to reopen the strait, paving the way for 60 days of nuclear talks. Asked by confidants why Trump went for a temporary deal, the president pointed to new internal White House polling. Nearly 80% of Americans wanted an agreement to end the conflict, no matter its contents. And so, as we suggested on this program at the time, Donald Trump accepted that memorandum of understanding with Iran because his war was polling very badly. And it still is. New polling shows that 62% disapprove of how Donald Trump is handling his war in Iran. 65% say that the United States should make a deal to end the war as soon as possible. And 57% think Donald Trump was wrong in his decision to go to war with Iran. Donald Trump and his absurdly incompetent Treasury Secretary have for days now been threatening a so-called economic D-Day attack launched against Iran. The threat, which Donald Trump absolutely will not carry out, is for the United States to shut down all economic activity with any country that in any way does business with Iran. Scott Bessent is threatening to ban any country from using the American banking system in any way if they do business with Iran. Scott Bessent himself, in trying to sound threatening to Iran, described what he was talking about as, quote, blowing up the global financial system, end quote. That's his threat to Iran. And so we now have Scott Bessent acting like a worldwide economic terrorist in the Treasury Department, who says that his plan to defeat Iran is to blow up the global financial system. The reason that did not sound threatening to Iran is that even though Scott Bessent described his threat as blowing up the global financial system, he said very, very clearly that he's not going to do that.
You described this as an economic D-Day, but D-Day wasn't a threat of an invasion, and the U.S. didn't give a timeline to Germany. So why not impose the sanctions today?
Well, we are giving everyone the opportunity to remedy bad behavior. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system?
Yeah, good question, Scott. And the answer is you will not dare. And Donald Trump will once again back down from a Donald Trump threat. Donald Trump will not dare to blow up the global financial system because Donald Trump will also blow up the economy of the United States while he's at it. And everyone in the world knows that, very much including China. China is the largest buyer of Iran's oil, and China will continue to be the largest buyer of Iran's oil, no matter what Donald Trump and his clownish Treasury Secretary say. In Donald Trump's hopeless attempt to divert attention from his war in Iran, he has invited Chinese President Xi to the White House next month, and now all the questions about that visit are going to be about Iran, because today China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson said, quote, China is firmly against sanctions that have no basis in international law or UN Security Council mandate. Economic warfare and maximum pressure provide no solution. They only serve to fuel tensions, disrupt global economic and financial order, and hurt everyone else's interests. Dialogue and negotiation is the only right way forward. China's cooperation with Iran complies with international law. We are closely following the situation and will do everything necessary to protect China's rights and interests. And so you can be sure China will continue to pay Iran for its oil, and Donald Trump will not be able to do anything about that. The most striking response to Scott Bessent's childish threat came from the Speaker of Iran's parliament, who taught Natalie Harp and Donald Trump a thing or two today about devastatingly effective social media posting, exhibiting a fluency in American culture that no one in the Trump White House has with Iranian culture. The Speaker of Iran's parliament actually tweeted this. Him, economic D-Day, also him, 5 seconds later, LOL. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system? Sir, this ain't Normandy. This is improv night, and you forgot your own script.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. I'm back. I missed you. Thanks to everyone who filled in. The midterm primary season continues because it's a Tuesday in election year. We are waiting for results from a couple of states where polls closed in just the last hour. We've got one race in Georgia. That's where two Democrats are facing off in that special election runoff to finish the term of Congressman David Scott, who died in April. In Oklahoma, there's a Republican primary for the governorship. That's going to test Donald Trump's endorsement power. We've seen a lot of tests of his endorsement power. There's another race, though, where Trump is really deeply, truly 110% invested. And that, of course, is the Republican runoff for the Senate nomination in South Carolina. That runoff pits a January 6th election denier, sitting Congressman Ralph Norman, against Darlene Graham, of course, the sister of the late Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, Trump backed the political novice to finish out her brother's term. It was unclear if she was going to run for re-election until she declared, and then he's all in with her for that. And it's clear that South Carolina is not a swing state. It's a very conservative Republican state. It went for Trump in every presidential election he was on the ballot. But he has decided to invest a lot of time in this race. He has been personally campaigning for Graham, hoping voters will keep her in office permanently.
I think she's going to do phenomenally. I really think it's amazing. You know, she's never done it before, but she knows politics well. But she loves it. She loves our military. She loves things that have to do with greatness for America.
I mean, that's a great endorsement. She loves things that have to do with greatness. How can you not vote for that person? Graham has had some pretty grievous missteps you may have noticed, like answering a debate question about Taiwan by saying, and I quote her here, "I'm not that informed on national security," and then playing off the ensuing controversy by saying that voters were, quote, more concerned with boys and girls sports, which possibly true about Republican primary voters, never know. But it hasn't been working that well. It's definitely been turning off voters, and it's been leaving the Senate nomination very much up for grabs.
Before the debate, were you going to vote for Darlene Graham?
Yes.
And that the debate changed the calculus. Talk about that.
Yeah, that answer just blew me away. I couldn't believe she didn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm. So because of that, you're considering Ralph Norman now?
Yeah. I'm still on the fence.
The dynasty and the selection of Darlene Graham is not something that I support. We did not pay President Trump and hire President Trump to tell us who to vote for our U.S. Senate seats.
Well, President Trump would beg to differ. Now, it's entirely possible that Graham still pulls off the win tonight. I mean, again, she is the surviving sister of Lindsey Graham. She's got enormous apparatus from Donald Trump and Fox News behind her. But it clearly is not a given, right? This is going to be a close race. We're starting to get results. You can see them down there. Like, no one's running away with this right now. And I think that is because a Trump endorsement in a Republican primary does not have the same cachet it used to have with Republican voters. And I mean used to just a few months ago. Just a few months ago, when the primary season kicked off in April. Remember this? Remember, Trump wanted revenge against a fairly obscure set of Republican politicians. That was the Indiana Senate Republicans who had voted against and shot down his plan for gerrymandering to sort of yoink another Republican seat in that state. And so, out of vengeance, he endorsed their primary challengers in state Senate races. And 6 of his endorsees won. Again, these are small races, right? And they knocked off the incumbents. And it was seen, rightly, I think, as proof that Trump's grip on the Republican Party, and particularly on the Republican primary voter, was as strong as ever. But a lot's happened since April, and it's been a much more mixed record since. So you got Trump endorsing the Freedom Caucus Congressman Andy Ogles, who got upset in the primary just a few weeks ago. Same happened to Florida Congressman Corey Mills, who was also sort of scandal-ridden. Trump's candidate for Wyoming governor lost by 15 points. And then there's election denier Mike Lindell, who still hasn't conceded despite losing the Minnesota governor's nomination by double digits. In fact, as of last Tuesday, Trump-backed candidates had lost 10 times just in this election cycle, and that is as many losses as his candidates racked up in the 2018, 2020, and 2024 primaries combined. Pretty clear signal there in the data, right? His political capital is ebbing. Now, your average swing voter pretty clearly hates the way things are going in this country. We see that in all the polling. You see it in interviews. But the thing about it is, it's never really mattered that much to Donald Trump what the swing voter, what the median voter thinks. It matters to him whether he can control the Republican Party, because the Republican Party and his control over its base and primary voters is the fundamental source of his power. And for a decade, people have predicted that power was slipping, that his grip on the party was slipping, and it just never really has. And that's where a new poll from Ipsos this week seems really instructive. This number caught my eye. So the top line here is that just 13% of Americans strongly approve of the job Donald Trump is doing. 13%. That's compared to half of Americans who strongly disapprove. But here's a number that I found really interesting, because they're even more grim for Trump when you look at just Republicans, okay? Only 35% of people in the Republican Party say they strongly approve of Trump. That's a real threat to his power. One of the weird things about how Trump has kind of weathered high disapprovals for years is because the people who did approve of him, Republicans, approve so strongly, right? And they would punish people who got crosswise with him in primaries. And now the people whose love for him is still unshakable amount to a third of Republicans, which means all of the trends that we have all seen among normies since Trump was elected in 2024 for the second time, everything we've seen, historic disapproval from Democrats and independents, it's actually now starting to ripple through the Republican Party and the Republican base and Republican establishment. And for more than a decade, Donald Trump has been the poster boy for the old adage, it's better to be lucky than good. He has assumed everything would work out for him because I think he's the luckiest man who ever lived. Everything always has. He's not trying to be good now. He hasn't gotten any better at governing or campaigning, but is also starting to look like he is not maybe as lucky as he used to be. Ali Velshi, host of the 11th Hour, chief data reporter for MS Now, is at the big board with the latest on all the elections happening right now. So let's see where things stand now.
Now, let's look at South Carolina. We've got a third of the vote in right now, and we've just crossed over into more of the vote being day of than advance, which is going to allow us to have a better picture of exactly what's going on statewide. Darlene Graham is running at about 54% to Ralph Norman's 46%. This is around where she's been. She's getting a little bit of an edge as more day of vote comes in. But you'll remember this is a runoff. So in the election, as it happened 2 weeks ago exactly, Darlene Graham was at 32%. Ralph Norman was at 4.7%. Let's go to Rock Hill. This is where Ralph Norman wins a lot of his votes. This is where he does very well. He was at 49% that night. Darlene Graham was at 27%. Look at how he's doing tonight. He's at 67.6% here, and Darlene Graham is at 32.4%. Obviously, two candidates have dropped out of the race, so they're picking up those other votes. I want to show you another picture in another part of South Carolina. This is Horry County, where Russell Fry actually came in first 2 weeks ago. Darlene Graham had 35%. Mark Sanford, Ralph Norman had less than 10% each. Look at how that's going for Darlene Graham. She's got 73% of the vote here. So they're both picking up vote that's available. She's doing better at it for now, and she's sort of staying with that right now. If you look at it statewide, you can see she's maintaining her 5-6 point lead.
Yeah, so you've got 2/3 of the vote out. One of the things I was looking for, although you just made mention, is that whether we'd see a big divergence between early vote and election day vote because of how she has closed this campaign and whether in one direction or another. It doesn't seem like we've got a clear pattern so far.
Doesn't seem to be. At this point, it's matched, and the numbers haven't changed that much. This is the kind of spread we've been seeing, other than the very first dump of votes that looked overwhelmingly favorable to Darlene Graham. It's stayed like this for the last 20% of the vote.
Yeah, we're going to see.
Which means that, we'll have to watch this for a couple hours.
Yeah, definitely.
This afternoon, Donald Trump, frantically smashing every knob and every lever at his disposal, is urging the American people to pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Because while at times his ability to warp the truth and conjure false realities for his supporters has felt like wizardry, this hour, these smoke and mirrors are right there in front of us. According to the very latest Reuters Ipsos poll, Trump's approval is scraping along at 33%. That number is the lowest it's been at any point in either of his terms for the second such survey in a row. No surprise, he's even pulling the old Wizard of Oz routine on his poor polling, insisting it's all fake, the stuff of radical left Democrats designed to demoralize Republicans. But tall tales can't change reality for him or anyone else. Part of it has to do with the wholly unpopular standoff with Iran, and there's fresh data to share with you on that topic in a few moments. But first, consider this. Today's developments related to another war he started, the trade dispute with Canada. This morning, Canadian officials went public with their plans for retaliation. Watch.
Today, I'm announcing that Canada will match the United States tariffs dollar for dollar, rate for rate. The terms proposed by the U.S. administration were uneconomic, unfair, and ultimately unacceptable. They asked too much of Canada and offered too little in return.
On the central dynamic in this broadening and unwanted conflict, David Frum writes, quote, against Canada, Trump is fighting a trade war that very few Americans support, under leadership that most Americans reject, to achieve results that virtually all Americans would dismiss as pointless, if not crazy. Quote, against Trump, Canadians are fighting a trade war that the great majority support, under leadership that commands broad assent to defend their independence and self-respect. That's a war that even the weaker side can win, especially if it needs to hold on only a few months longer to survive. In the face of that disparity and a bankruptcy of actual ideas, Trump's doing the hocus pocus thing again in the form of a photo posted to social media with Lake Ontario crossed out and Lake America emblazoned in tacky gold letters. Joining our coverage, staff writer at The Atlantic, video podcast host David Frum is here. Also with us, Media Matters for America President Angela Corazon. Molly is still with us. David Frum, at what point do Americans get sick of all the winning?
Well, you're seeing a little light over my right-hand shoulder. That is the sunshine glinting off Lake Ontario, as it's still called by all who border the lake. One of the things I think that needs to be emphasized in that clip you just ran is that the damage that this trade war is doing to the United States is not done primarily by Canadian retaliation. It's done by the tariffs themselves. And let me give you a very concrete example. Aluminum is a product that goes into just about everything, from beer cans to home appliances, aircraft, the industrial roofing. About a quarter of America's aluminum comes from Canada because America doesn't produce enough and never will. Aluminum is densely consuming of electricity. Canada is a superpower in electricity. The result of these tariffs on Canada are that manufacturers in Japan pay about $3,000 a ton for aluminum. Manufacturers in Europe, the UK, pay $3,000 a ton for aluminum. In the United States, manufacturers pay $5,000 a ton for aluminum. That's not because of anything Canada did. That's because of what Trump did.
I just wonder, Angelo, how quickly that reality catches up with him.
It depends on who you're talking about and which earth you're on, because obviously in the larger context, most Americans, it's going to catch up really fast. People are going to feel it almost immediately. The part that I was surprised by, though, was how the rest of the right-wing media is reacting, because you'd think that there'd be a little bit more skepticism, especially now. Maybe they wouldn't attack him. I didn't expect that, but that they wouldn't be so excited about this. And that's the part that I found weird, is that in the last day, since this is all sort of unfolded, the larger right-wing media ecosystem is fully behind him. And in fact, and it's not just that they're behind him, they're even pushing a larger narrative to make it make sense. They're basically turning Canada into China. It's the only way that they can try to make this make sense. And that's been a big argument that they've been pushing. And so I think in that ecosystem, in the big part of the diehards, they're actually going to get further separated from reality. Any of the pain they feel, they'll attribute it to something else or just mentally block it out. Obviously, the rest of us, as you sort of talked about in the polls leading in, those numbers are going to get worse for him. But he'll still have his backstop.
I want you to take a listen. Alex Tabbitt, our colleague, spoke to a Trump voter in Iowa who I think can give you a sense of the way that this is all trickling down. Take a listen.
As a mother, what is it like living with these economic conditions?
It's hard. It makes me feel like I'm a horrible mother sometimes, because I'm stressing about what I'm going to do, or do I have enough money to put gas in, or do I need to buy eggs and milk for my child, or do I need to not go to work every day to make that money because gas prices are so expensive? And then we're always told, this is going to change, or I'm going to make this better, or we're going to make this better. But where's it at? We're not seeing it at all.
Molly, so much of policy can feel amorphous, but what she just described right there, that feels real. She can feel it every day in her life, and that drives voters to the polls.
Yeah, and remember, all of the gas prices, it's not a mystery how this happened, right? Trump went to war with Iran. They closed the strait, as everyone said they would, and gas prices went up. I mean, this is not rocket science. And in fact, he spent he spent a lot of time talking about how the war was over and then gas prices went down and the war's back on, So he really showed that he was actually the reason this was happening. But I think what I'm so struck by is that we're cruising into the midterms and he's decided to go to trade war with Canada when the states that he desperately needs to win, Michigan, Maine, Alaska, have gubernatorials and Senate races, and they are states that, Michigan especially, trade a lot with Canada. People are going back and forth all the time. If ever there were a ill-timed trade war, this would be it. And the other thing which I think is really worth mentioning is the whole point of tariffs is to onshore manufacturing. It's to get things to be built in this country. And we know now, because we're almost 2 years into these trade wars, that it isn't working. So then what are we doing? If it's not onshoring manufacturing, then why are you putting on the tariffs? And that I don't understand.
I want you, David Frum, to pick up on the argument Molly is making here, because now you have the vice president being dispatched to Maine to carry the president's water. You have Susan Collins running as far away from them and their disastrous trade policies as she possibly can. You're watching that with candidates all over the country, including in Montana. I mean, I just wonder how much running room, how much distance these candidates are going to be given to put between themselves and this administration.
How much running room they're given, I don't know. How much running room they will take is up to them. Think of that poor woman that in Iowa. 30% of Iowa's exports as a state go to the Canadian market. It's not just Michigan and Ohio that are heavily Canadian dependent. It's all kinds of states. And if that woman goes shopping, and if she is down shrinking her food budget and looking for cheaper alternatives, if she buys spaghetti for her family, that's probably made from durum wheat that probably came from Canada. So these are intensely integrated markets. It's like fighting a trade war with Canada is like dropping the anchor through your side of the boat, hoping that the water will stay on the Canadian side of the boat. But this is an integrated continental market, and Americans suffer when the trade relationship with Canada suffers too.
It is interesting to me that they have not been able to reorient themselves as a party or as a media apparatus to this new reality. I want you all to take a listen. This is Abdul El-Sayed on Fox News just last night.
The issue that people are worried about is not that somehow somebody's going to come and push Sharia law on them. The issue in Michigan is people are worried about how they're going to afford their gas. You guys love to play this culture war game where you use these words that sound really foreign to avoid actually having to talk about the issues that everyday people like to talk about.
Should men play women's sports?
I'm running for U.S. Senate. Jesse, it's insane. I'm out here trying to take on like the healthcare crisis in Big Pharma, and you're asking me about who gets to play what sports. It's silly.
You seem a little naive, Abdul. I give you credit for facing the music, but some of the stuff's just straight up wacky.
You know you didn't ask me about?
What?
We got a president of the United States who cares more about the drapes in a ballroom that shouldn't be built than he cares about the war he just got us into, or that he cares about the affordability crisis. That seems to me to be a little bit wacky.
Angela, I would say that they're off message, but they don't have an economic message.
No, they definitely don't have one at all. And, they're obviously going to be all over the place. And I think it sort of ties in a couple threads here. One, what Molly was referencing before, like, why is Trump doing this now? It's almost like he's acting like a guy that isn't concerned about any of the political or democratic checks or realities that typically govern a democracy, right? He doesn't seem to care. And then to your larger point about them not being able to reorient, it's across the ecosystem. It's not just Republicans, but as you saw in that interview, it's the rest of the traditional right-wing media ecosystem. Large parts of the other ecosystem, podcasters, people that are frontline, that sort of have to rely, or they're one step closer to their revenue models, they're a lot more adaptable because their bottom line gets affected much faster. But with Fox, this segment could have been something that happened 15 years ago on Fox News. Subject-wise, the way that they played it out, 30-minute interview where they sort of mine it for 90 seconds of content that they then run endlessly over the next day or two to sort of reinforce the narrative about scary socialism that they are always sort of trying to sort of work their audience up into a frenzy. And for them, unlike some of the other stuff, it's calibrated, it's calculated to distract and deflect from, as you know, the one thing they desperately don't want to be talking about, which is the economy.
Here now to discuss MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard, political strategist Sawyer Hackett, Rolling Stone's political news reporter Nikki McCann Ramirez, and Nebraska Democratic Party Chair Jane Klebb. It is good to see you all. Vaughn, help us understand what the White House is thinking here.
I think we have to understand what the objective is of Donald Trump specifically, Alicia. And if we take him at his word repeatedly over the last 18 months, it's that he wants Canada's economy to effectively fold. He himself last year said that the Canadians would not be able to sustain without the U.S. as a trading partner, and that it would cease to exist as a viable country. Those were the words of Donald Trump. And so he has been very clear about what his goal is here. And the consequences for the economy domestically back at home in the United States have been of, frankly, explicit little concern to him here at this point in time. At some juncture, will it? I think that that's a question for the President of the United States to answer. But we even saw his own Secretary of Transportation, for example, Sean Duffy, come out and suggest that, Canada isn't going to win a trade war with the United States, that they don't even have a military that would be able to effectively defend itself without U.S. defense support. Of course, that is not true. 158 soldiers died in Afghanistan on behalf of the U.S. war effort here. But I think this really hits at the heart of what the goal of this White House is. And right now, everybody is falling in line with Donald Trump, not defending that prices are high, but defending the trade war that he is doubling down on yet again.
It's just so wild, Sawyer, that the president has managed to absolutely botch this. Canadians are allies. They are known. They are notorious for their friendliness. But apparently even they have their limits. I want you to take a listen. This is Ontario Premier Doug Ford just yesterday.
Did the Prime Minister tell you to ask you to tone it down a bit?
No, he didn't. I'm not going to comment, but he wasn't against that. And I have a lot of real estate on my ass, so he has a lot of room to kiss my ass.
Here's the thing. I wonder how you explain to an American, Sawyer, which in your past roles on campaigns has been your job, why having one of our closest allies, closest trading partners annoyed, angry with us, frustrated with us is bad for average Americans.
Yeah, it's horrible for average Americans, especially at a time when their prices are already, sky high. The prices of gas, the price of groceries, that Donald Trump is relaunching his dumbest trading war with one of our top trading partners just 7 days out from the midterms. And this is going to affect, I think, some of the most important states heading into the midterms from, Maine, Iowa, Michigan. These are states that are the top exporters to Canada. Canada is their top export country on earth. And they are absolutely going to be affected by this. And, it's ironic because Donald Trump is carving out energy from this new round of tariffs. And energy is the one area, I think, that makes up the bulk of Canadians' exports to the United States. And so if you remove that from our kind of trade balance, we have a net surplus with Canada when it comes to trade. And so by carving out energy and leaving all of these other tariffs in place, he's going to, increase our bills, our prices on everything that Americans consume while, not actually doing anything to bring manufacturing back to the United States or rebalancing our trade deficit or bringing revenue into the United States. It's just illogical in all areas.
Nikki, Sawyer referenced Maine. Vice President Vance visited the state yesterday. He talked about the trade war. Let's take a listen and then we'll discuss.
Canada is a country that has underinvested in its military that quite literally would get invaded by a foreign country were it not for the umbrella of protection provided by the United States of America. I think that we need to send a message loud and clear to the Prime Minister of Canada. Stop taking advantage of the people of Maine. Stop taking advantage of America. It's over.
Okay, so lots of interesting things there. One, the fact that echoes what we heard from Secretary Duffy, this idea that Canada is somehow bilking the United States of money, sort of some echoes of this MAGA, Make America Great Again, America First. The problem is that the policy itself does not, in fact, either make America great nor put America first.
No, not at all. And it looks, truly, Trump's actions in the past week almost seem micro-targeted to annoy moderate voters in these critical swing states. No, truly, it's not just this trade war with Canada. It's publicly announcing that he's going to undercut beef prices for American farmers in Texas. That's a huge deal. It's notable that at that event in Maine, Susan Collins did not campaign with Vance. Indeed. She did not show up. She skipped it. And she has publicly said that this is a bad idea, that in her state, so many of the products produced by Maine, blueberries, lobsters, all the things we know and love, go across the border to be processed and then come back into the United States. And the tariffs you just mentioned, paper products, those little like cups that blueberries come in, those little pint paper things, those are some things that could be tariffs. And that's not just going to affect Maine. It's going to affect states and cities all across the U.S. So you're seeing in this moment, at a time when voters, consumers are already being squeezed, Trump is picking a trade war with our second largest trade partner, a partner that is responsible for between 10 to 15% of the products we import into the United States. And it's not just blueberries and steel and paper products. It's also this energy threat. Again, consumers are already being squeezed by high gas prices. The premier of Ontario said, we can cut off your electricity. We can make this harder. We can make this worse. Roughly 70 days before a midterm election?
Jane Clubb, since you think about this in terms of elections and constituents in Nebraska, I think it is worth noting that Senator Collins, while she did not attend that event with the vice president in Maine, instead released a statement saying, urging the administration to return to the negotiating table. That gives you a sense of where things are. Nebraska, not a border state, but I want to know how that beef announcement played in your state.
Yeah, another strongly worded letter from Senator Collins. I guess we should not be surprised. Look, farmers and ranchers are angry at Trump. They expected him to come into office and institute country of origin labeling, something they've been asking for decades and still haven't gotten it. But Trump promised that was going to be something he was going to do, like he promised all of us that our grocery prices were going to be lower. And none of that has happened. Meanwhile, Trump, as we know, has pocketed over $2 billion since he's been in the White House for his own personal gain. And he's consumed with building a ballroom rather than making sure that our beef prices are lower. And he could do that by making sure that we had more competition. Instead, the four packers that continue to consolidate prices and consolidate, the pressure that they put on our local farmers and ranchers, Trump's not doing anything. And in fact, we had a Tyson's plant close, which just worsens kind of the competition for our ranchers. Ranchers want competition. They don't want handouts. And Trump is making it worse by flooding the market now with foreign beef.
Can you help me understand, Jane, how that is changing the politics in your state?
Absolutely. So in the Senate race in particular, Pete Ricketts continues to put on a cowboy hat pretending he stands with farmers and ranchers, but he is a billionaire. And he's going up an independent, Dan Osborne, who's a mechanic, who's a Navy veteran, who's a dad, who's an independent. And the Democratic Party is standing alongside Dan Osborne, along with a coalition of voters, including Republicans and independents, because we're tired of this corporate one-party Republican rule that doesn't ever deliver for families. When Democrats are in office, we know that corn and cattle prices are higher for farmers and ranchers and prices are lower for consumers. And so we as Democrats have to get a lot better at showing up more in rural communities. This issue is definitely taking fire, not only on the Senate race, but in the governor's race, where we have Lynn Walls going up against Governor Pillen in a very tight competitive race. It's not on national radar, but it is definitely here in Nebraska, as well as, of course, our second congressional district. And so even in the urban areas, people are concerned about how this is impacting our rural communities and our family farmers and ranchers.
Sawyer, you have a Republican strategist based in Michigan who said this, quote, "It really undermines our messaging when we're trying to address affordability." I wonder what message exactly is being undermined, Sawyer, when the president himself is calling affordability a hoax. It's the problem. He is not bought in on the premise.
No, he's been consistent on this, I think, from the beginning of this administration. The same way that he's lied about how these tariffs aren't inflationary. For the past 2 years, he's told us that these tariffs aren't inflationary for American consumers, that these are going to be paid by foreign countries. And here you have him reducing tariffs, slashing tariffs on beef imports to lower prices on beef. So clearly, it's just undermining his entire economic argument. It's been illogical, I think, from the beginning of his administration. But Donald Trump has told us explicitly within the last couple weeks that he thinks affordability is BS, that he thinks it's a hoax, that he thinks it's invented by Democrats. And I think that is just not landing with average American voters, especially in these swing states, especially in these states that have very strong economic ties to foreign countries like Canada, who are number one trade exports and import countries. So I don't think it's resonating with voters, and I think it's going to be a massive headache for Republican candidates across the country.